So for over 40 years, the absolute smartest minds in cognitive science basically believed that human language was, well, that it was nothing more than an isolated mathematical app just running quietly in the background of your brain.
Yeah, literally just no emotions, no cultural context, just cold, hard algebra.
Right, like algebra calculating your sentences before you even open your mouth is wild to think about. But anyway, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are exploring the very wiring of the human mind.
We really are. We're getting into what it actually means to speak and think and just navigate the world as a human being.
Exactly. We are unpacking the massive intellectual empire built by Noam Chomsky and then the complete scientific rebellion that eventually rose up to tear it down.
And it truly is one of the most profound paradigm shifts we've ever seen in the study of human cognition. I mean, it's a huge clash.
Okay, let's unpack this because our source material today is this really fascinating set of university lecture notes that tracks this entire intellectual war.
Yeah, the notes laid out perfectly.
Right. So on one side, you have Chomsky's generative grammar, which basically ruled the academic world with an iron fist for decades.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, there's this revolutionary pushback called cognitive linguistics.
But you know, to understand the rebellion, we really have to understand the empire first.
Oh, absolutely. We have to look at what made Chomsky's theories so revolutionary in the first place. Right?
We do. I mean, his influence, you really can't overstate it. Noam Chomsky is universally dubbed the father of modern linguistics for a reason.
Right. He basically reset the whole field.
He did. His work literally set the timeline for linguistic research. We're talking starting back in 1957 with his book Syntactic Structures and driving the conversation all the way through to 1995 with the Minimalist program.
Which is just a massive run at the top.
It is, because before him, linguists spent a lot of time just categorizing sounds or observing dialects, like just collecting data. But Chomsky flipped the entire field inward. Well, in 1968, he articulated this philosophy that language is a process of free creation. The laws and principles of language are fixed, they're finite, but the way we use those principles to generate speech is infinitely varied.
Right. The quote from the notes is, infinite use of finite means.
Exactly. Infinite use of finite means.
I love that framing. It immediately makes me think of like a bucket of Lego bricks.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, because if you have a bucket with a finite, easily countable set of blocks, say, your basic vocabulary words and a handful of structural rules, you can sit down and build an infinite number of unique spaceships or castles that have literally never existed before.
Right, you're just combining them in new ways.
Exactly. Like you and I right now are probably generating sentences that have never been spoken in the history of the universe just by snapping together that finite set of linguistic Legos.
And that Lego concept is at the very heart of the biggest question in cognitive science at that time. Chomsky wanted to know the exact shape of those structural bricks.
He wanted to find the instruction manual.
Yes. He wanted to know what invisible internal rules were making them click together, because he didn't view language as some cultural artifact that a child just picks up from their environment through, mimicry.
Right.
He argued that language is actually a biological instinct. It's driven by what he called universal grammar.
Wait, so if universal grammar is an instinct, you're saying a toddler doesn't actually learn language from scratch just by listening to their parents?
According to Chomsky, no, they don't.
They just, boot up a piece of pre-installed software?
That is exactly the core of the generative argument. Chomsky believed there's an innate language faculty common to every single human being.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an internal information processing machine built right into our biology from birth. To a generative linguist, the human mind is quite literally a computational device.
So it's not learning, it's just turning it on.
Basically. When a toddler is exposed to English or Japanese, they aren't learning the abstract concept of a noun or a verb from their parents. They are just flipping specific toggles on a biological machine that already knows how the underlying math of language works.
That's wild.
And their goal as scientists wasn't just to observe people talking. They wanted to achieve what Chomsky termed explanatory adequacy.
Explanatory adequacy.
Yeah.
Okay, meaning not just pointing out what the rules of a language are, but figuring out why the base code of the human brain is written that way in the first place.
Precisely. Why is this mathematical system structured this specific way? What's fascinating here is that Chomsky orchestrated a radical shift away from the social world.
He just totally ignored the culture part.
Completely. He argued that looking at how language is used in culture or, everyday communication is completely uninformative if you want to understand the actual mechanics of the brain.
So he just shifted the focus entirely to the inside of the head.
Yes, to the unconscious psychological system of knowledge. To him, the social stuff was just noise obscuring the underlying math.
Okay, but that brings up a massive contradiction, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, if language is this pristine, innate mathematical machine just humming away perfectly in our subconscious, why is everyday speech so incredibly messy?
Oh,
I
right.
mean, we are constantly misunderstanding each other. We stutter, we trail off. If the internal math is so perfect, why is the actual output so confusing?
No, Chomsky actually anticipated that exact tension. He introduced the concept to bridge the gap between that perfect internal machine and the messy real world. He divided language into two totally separate domains, performance and competence.
Okay, let's see if I can map those out based on the notes here. So performance would be the messy output, right? Like the actual sounds coming out of our mouths, filled with the stutters, the half-finished thoughts, bad phrasing, all of that.
Yes, performance is the raw data we observe in the real world. But underneath that performance sits your competence.
And competence is the perfect machine.
Exactly. It's the unconscious psychological model of underlying rules. And Chomsky actually used the messiness of our performance, specifically the structural ambiguities in our everyday speech, to prove that this hidden machine has to exist.
Oh, right. The lecture notes have some brilliant examples of this ambiguity. Let me throw one at you. Uh, Flying planes can be dangerous.
Right. So if you just look at that sentence, is the act of flying a plane the dangerous part? Or are the planes themselves dangerous objects because they're currently in the air?
Exactly. The words alone don't tell you. The performance is totally ambiguous.
Hmm.
Oh, here's another one from the notes. I saw the man with the telescope.
That's a classic. Are you looking through a telescope to see a man in the distance? Or are you looking with your naked eye at a man who happens to be holding a telescope?
Right. The surface level syntax is completely identical for both interpretations.
Hmm.
It's just noun, verb, noun phrase, prepositional phrase.
It looks exactly the same on paper.
And the best example in the notes really drives this home. Two sentences, structurally identical. Agnes is easy to please versus Agnes is eager to please.
Yeah, you really have to ask yourself who is doing the pleasing in those sentences.
Right. In the first one, someone else is pleasing Agnes. In the second one, Agnes is the one doing the pleasing.
And to Chomsky, these ambiguities are the ultimate proof of his theory. Surface-level language is entirely insufficient to explain meaning.
Because if it was just the surface words, we wouldn't understand the difference.
Exactly. We must possess a deeper level of unconscious structural understanding our competence that allows us to instantly recognize that easy to please and eager to please operate on totally different mechanical tracks, even if the surface words look exactly the same.
So just to clarify for everyone listening, when we say grammar in this context, we clearly aren't talking about, like, the prescriptive grammar of a middle school English classroom.
Oh, no, not at all.
We aren't talking about the rules of spelling or scolding someone for ending a sentence with a preposition right. We're talking about base-level cognitive architecture.
Yeah, generative linguists do not care about societal rule books, and they also don't care much about descriptive grammar, which is just tracking how people actually talk in daily life.
They're looking for the math.
Right, they are hunting for foundational syntactic formulas. The source notes describe how they use mathematical parse trees, for instance, to map out the structural relations between words, like S goes to NP and VP.
The notes visualize this as formulas, but looking at how they actually function, they operate a lot more like Russian nesting dolls to me.
That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah, because you have this massive sentence, but inside it is a smaller component, like a noun phrase. And if you open that up, inside is a verb phrase, and inside that is a specific modifier. It's an algorithm taking smaller components and embedding them inside larger ones.
And that embedding process is exactly what linguists mean when they talk about recursive rules.
Recursion. Right.
Yeah, you can take a rule and apply it to its own output, essentially nesting ideas within ideas infinitely. To Chomsky's camp, mapping those Russian nesting dolls is literally mapping the base code of human cognition.
Okay, so mechanically speaking, where does this nesting doll algorithm actually live?
What do you mean?
Like if we had this deep unconscious syntax machine calculating phrases, does it permeate the whole brain? Is it tied into our memory, our emotions, our physical senses?
Not at all. And this leads us to a pivotal 1980 concept from Chomsky, the modularity of mind.
Modularity. Okay.
He argued that the human mind isn't just one big general-purpose sponge that learns everything the exact same way. The mind is actually a highly differentiated structure made up of distinct subsystems.
Like compartments, or actually the notes compared to the human body.
Yes.
Like you aren't just a generic mass of cells. You have a heart, lungs, a liver. Each organ has its own specific developmental history and its own isolated function.
And Chomsky believed the brain operates on that exact same principle. In his modularity framework, the language faculty is an autonomous, isolated computational device.
Completely on its own.
Completely. It sits in your brain, generating those recursive nesting dolls, completely independently from your other mental faculties.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Independent from everything else. So, my visual processing, my emotional state, my spatial awareness, the language machine operates totally separately from all of that.
That is the assertion. It is a self-contained biological system.
I just don't see how that works.
Well, the logic is, if language is an automatic generation happening in a sealed mental module, then studying how you order a coffee at a cafe or how you express grief at a funeral isn't going to teach you anything about the biological machine itself. You have to strip away the social context to see the math.
Okay, I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Studying language without its physical and social context feels like, well, it feels like trying to understand how a steering wheel works without looking at the tires or the road.
That's a vivid analogy.
Right, because sure, you can measure the wheel's rotation, you can calculate the friction of the leather, but without the road, the movement of the wheel is entirely meaningless. You can't separate the words we use from the physical world we are trying to navigate.
Well, Chomsky would argue that you absolutely can and must take the car off the road and put it in a sterile laboratory if you want to understand the underlying mechanics of the steering column.
But the road is the whole point of the car.
In science, you have to isolate the variable you want to study. If you include the road, the weather, and the driver's mood, you have too many variables to map the core algorithm.
But what if the algorithm itself is built out of those physical variables? What if the road is the only reason the steering wheel exists in that shape?
And your frustration right there, that is exactly what fractured the scientific community.
Really?
Yes, that feeling that you simply cannot divorce the mechanics of language from the messiness of the human experience that is the catalyst that birthed cognitive linguistics.
The rebellion.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to me that scientists spent decades trying to map language as cold algebra, only for this massive contingent to finally stand up and say, wait, we are human beings in physical world, not biological calculators?
The pushback was inevitable, honestly. But the warning signs were actually there long before Chomsky even published his first book.
Oh yeah, the notes mention this. There's a brilliant quote from 1937, right?
Yeah.
From a Polish anthropologist.
Yes, Bronislaw Malinowski.
So this is 2 decades before Chomsky's reign even started.
Exactly. Malinowski was already warning the academic community against the temptation to treat language as a standalone science of words. He argued forcefully that any study of speaking must be treated as a branch of the general science of culture.
Which makes perfect sense.
To him, the meaning of a word was intrinsically tied to the physical action of the person saying it and the cultural context they were standing in at that moment.
He saw the trap early. He knew that the moment you isolate the language faculty, you lose the meaning entirely. But looking at the timeline, it wasn't until the late 1970s that Malinowski's warning really materialized into an organized scientific rival to generative grammar.
Right. The real spark for that formalized rebellion came from a linguist named George Lakoff. In 1978, Lakoff launched a direct, systematic critique of Chomsky's modularity concept.
He really went after the core idea.
He didn't just disagree, he attacked the core premise.
Yeah, Lakoff looked at this idea of a sterile, isolated language organ and basically said it was a biological impossibility.
He insisted it was wildly unrealistic to divorce language from sensory motor development, memory, perception, and personality. To Lakoff, language isn't an isolated module at all. It is deeply, inextricably entangled with every single aspect of our physical bodies.
So going back to analogies, if Chomsky sees language as a standalone, isolated software app running silently in the background of the brain,
Right.
Lakoff and the cognitive linguists argue that language is actually integrated into the entire hardware of the device.
Yes.
It's hardwired into the camera, the microphone, the temperature sensors, the GPS tracking where the user physically moves. You just cannot understand the software without looking at how the physical hardware interacts with the environment.
And that shift in perspective completely exploded the field in the 1980s. Cognitive scientists realized that our physical bodily experience actually dictates our grammar.
Which is huge.
It led to foundational texts like Lakoff and Johnson's Metaphors We Live By in 1980, followed quickly by groundbreaking work from scholars like Langacker and Fauconnier.
Okay, let's dig into that mechanism for a second.
Yeah.
How exactly does my physical body dictate my grammar?
Well, it comes down to how we conceptualize abstract ideas. Under the cognitive model, we don't have abstract mathematical code. We have physical experiences that we map onto language.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about the concept of quantity. When you add more water to a glass, the water level physically goes up, right? So we use the physical direction of up to describe abstract increases. We say prices are going up or someone's mood is elevated.
Oh, wow. That makes perfect sense.
Right. Yeah, like we associate standing tall with health and energy and slumping down with sickness or depression. So we say things are looking up or someone is feeling down. Our physical relationship with gravity is literally building our syntax.
Exactly. We also map temperature onto affection, calling people warm or frigid. Because as infants, physical warmth from a parent is our very first experience of love and safety.
That's incredible.
Language isn't math, it's metaphor based on muscle, bone, and sensory perception.
That is just a staggering departure from Chomsky's parse trees. I mean, it's a completely different universe.
Yeah.
But the Knights are careful to point out that this broader, messier, human-centric view wasn't just invented by Lakoff in the 80s, right?
No, not at all. While the brand Cognitive Linguistics crystallized then, it rests on a much older tradition. The source notes mention scholars like Jackendorf, Hudson, and Wiersbicke, alongside a very long history of European philologists. And philologists being the scholars who study language and historical texts, tracking how words actually evolve alongside human culture over centuries.
Yes. These scholars spent their lives buried in the reality of how human beings actually communicate across generations.
They saw the messiness firsthand.
Right. They refused to accept the isolation of the language faculty because their historical data showed that words constantly bend, break, and evolve based on cultural and physical shifts. They kept the flame alive, insisting that linguistics must remain tethered to the reality of human existence.
So, synthesizing this whole journey, we really are looking at two totally different ways of viewing the human mind.
We are.
We started with the Chomsky's world-changing empire, this belief that the brain contains an innate, perfect, rule-generating machine, a biological calculator churning out infinite uses of finite means through universal grammar, while just ignoring the messy realities of the outside world. And then we explored the rebellion of cognitive linguistics, which essentially tore down the walls of that isolated compartment and argued that language is actually a deeply interconnected web, woven entirely from our physical bodies, our memories, and our interactions with the world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't just an academic debate over sentence structure.
No, it's way bigger than that.
This is fundamentally about what it means to be a human being. Are we biological computers executing hidden syntactic code in sterile modules of our brains? Or are we integrated beings where our thoughts, our words, and our physical biology are entirely inseparable?
It completely changes how you view every single word you speak. And, it leaves us with an incredibly provocative question to ponder.
Oh, definitely.
Because if Lakoff and the cognitive linguists are right, if our language is fundamentally dependent on our sensory motor development and our physical perception of gravity, temperature, and space,
Yeah.
what happens if we change the physical experience of the human race?
Right. What happens to the language?
Exactly. How might human language evolve or fundamentally break down if a generation of humans were born and raised entirely in a zero-gravity environment? Or what if we possessed an entirely different set of physical senses, like the ability to echolocate or see infrared light?
The metaphors would have to change.
They would. If the very structure of our language relies on how we physically experience the world, then changing the physical experience of the universe must eventually change the base architecture of the language itself. We wouldn't just invent new words for zero gravity, we would have to invent entirely new ways of generating thought.
It's a fascinating thing to think about.
It really is. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.